Now let's talk about light reaction. Let's give you an overview of the light reaction. It's very simple. You see that this is a thylakoid. All these are the random. So light energy go through the stacks of the thylakoid, and then in each stacks of thylakoid, they have the photopigment chlorophyll. They can trap the sunlight, and then they will gain enough energy to split the water into oxygen. And then the hydrogen ion will go to the will remain inside the thylakoid space, and then establish a hydrogen ion gradient, so that you will make the ATP and NADPH, and then the NADPH and ATP will go to Calvin cycle as an energy source for Calvin cycle to make glucose. So here it says that chlorophyll is in the internal membrane of the chloroplast to absorb blue and red wavelengths, so that the green light will be reflected. That's why we can see the leaves is green. And then the absorbed light will split water and release oxygen and hydrogen ion. Hydrogen ion, as I told you, that they will stay inside the thylakoid. And we use the hydrogen ion and electrons to generate ATP and NADPH. The overview of the Calvin cycle is also very simple. So you have a chemical reaction that leads to convert oxide to reduce carbon dioxide into sugar, using the energy from ATP and NADPH. So that is the overall description. So carbon dioxide is like the input or the reactant, and the product or the output is glucose. And NADPH and ATP, they are the fuel, the energy invested in the Calvin cycle to make sugar. So before we start to go into the details of photosynthesis, we have to talk about the basic properties of the light. So you can see that all the lights, they are from photon. They are massless particles. They carry energy, and depending on the wavelength of the photon and also the energy of the photon, we generate something called electromagnetic spectrum. So electromagnetic spectrum is like this: the longer the wavelength, the less energy it carries. The shorter the wavelength, the more energy it carries. So it is inversely proportional. Energy inversely proportional to the wavelength. Wavelength, we usually use the Greek letter lambda to represent the unit of wavelength, lambda. So you can see that red light, it has the longest wavelength. Purple light, it has the shortest wavelength. But red light has a lower energy than the purple light. Similarly, if you look at here, we have microwave, we have TV wave, radio wave. All these, they have long wavelength, but they have low energy, so they are not harmful to human body. But for example, X-ray that we do in the hospital, they have short wavelength but high energy. High energy meaning that they can penetrate our body, they can go through our body. When they can go through our body, what does it mean? First of all, it means that we can see what is inside in our body. That's how we take X-ray film. Second significance is that when X-ray go through our body, that means it can hurt, it can damage our body. That's why we should not take X-ray too often. And regarding to the color, why do we see the leaves as green? The reason is that the chlorophyll, the pigment in the leaf, they absorb the red light and the blue and purple light. The green light, this region, they do not absorb the green light, so they reflect the green light. That's how you see it green. Similarly, for apple, it looks red because the pigment or the skin of the apple absorbs yellow, green, blue, and purple light, except the red light, so the apple reflects the red light. That's why we can see the apple as red, the leaf as green. So the structure of the leaves, I already told you about it. The different layers, the cuticle prevent water loss on top layer, and then upper epidermis, and then the palisade mesophyll, spongy mesophyll, lower epidermis. In the lower epidermis, we have a stoma, a physical opening of the air hole, so that CO2 can go in. And the vein of the leaf, we have two types. One is called xylem. Xylem is the one that I mentioned before. It's a capillary tube that carries water from the root all the way to the leaves by using adhesion and cohesion. And then another one I haven't talked about is called phloem. Phloem carries the sugar from the leaves, go all the way down to the root and store sugar in the root. And the palisade mesophyll and the spongy mesophyll cell, they all have chloroplasts to capture sunlight. And the empty spaces here is for gaseous exchange. Stomata is the plural, singular is stoma. They are the pores on the lower part of the leaf, on the lower leaf surface for gaseous exchange. So closed at night. So the stomata can be closed depending on the humidity and the temperature. The reason is that when the stoma is closed, then it can reduce the loss of water. And so what happens is that all these cells, palisade mesophyll or spongy mesophyll, they can capture light by the chloroplasts inside the cell. You see all the green dot, they are the chloroplasts. And the chloroplasts, inside chloroplasts, you have this thylakoid membrane, and thylakoid, they are, I told you, it's like the poker chips. Inside the thylakoid, we have the chlorophyll, the pigment inside each of these poker chips. This thylakoid, and this is the photopigment chlorophyll is where the light reaction occur. So this is one thylakoid, and you can see this. So they call it antenna complex, or we call it a photosystem. You have the pigment like carotenoid, chlorophyll A or chlorophyll B. If remember in the Bio3B lab, you have a lab doing the paper chromatography. You use a strip of filter paper to split the chlorophyll, to split the pigment in the leaves. You will see a green pigment. They are the chlorophyll A and B. And then in the lab, you will see a yellow pigment. Yellow pigment, they are the carotenoids. So basically, we use the pigment to capture sunlight. And then after the pigment captures sunlight, the pigment will release a high energy electron. High energy electron will be passed to the nearby reaction center, and then you'll trigger other reaction cascade. So this is the overview of the photosystem 1 and photosystem 2. So it is a little bit counterintuitive. The light reaction starts with photosystem 2 first, and then followed by photosystem 1. So in photosystem 2, you see that sunlight is being absorbed by all these pigment molecule in the thylakoid. And then after this, then the pigment will receive the high energy from the sunlight. The pigment become excited because they receive the sun energy, the light energy. When they become excited, then they will generate a high energy electron. And then the high energy electron will go through electron transport chain similar to the electron transport chain in the cellular respiration. And then they will pass the high energy electron through the electron transport chain to photosystem 1. When photosystem 1 receives this high energy electron, and when the sunlight will also stimulate the photosystem 1. Then what happened is that, so now let's take a look. Let's look at the photosystem in the next video.